Hello there. I'm just doing this video and I'm titling it Problems from the Diabolists. It's maybe, I don't know if it's the first of a series or if it's just a one-off. I'm not sure. I'll just see how it goes, really. But I just wanted to have a look at some things here. And a lot of the things I see as being problems in the area that we might call diabolism, which is basically the worship of the devil and demons in one form or another. A lot of problems are actually probably inherited from modern Satanism, really, or from a kind of overlap, yeah, and that's something which I think anybody who tries to deal with diabolism will probably come across somewhere, and it's a very unfortunate thing, but it's something which I think you have to kind of like deal with and think about and think clearly about. And what I wanted to think about today was the way that people talk about the subject of darkness. Yeah. Some of the things I'm talking about here I dealt with in a past video called the fetishization of metaphysical darkness, and I will put a link to that in the description to this video. Yeah. My main problems with the way that people talk about darkness, in terms of people who kind of like might have any connection to the area of diabolism. My main problem, where there is a problem, because it's not always a problem, but my main problem is that the way people talk about darkness is derivative, it lacks any kind of subtlety, and there's no real philosophical or psychological inquiry apparent in any of their comments or any of their references to so-called darkness. But what do we mean by darkness, and what are people meaning by darkness? It's largely become a kind of buzzword or a buzz concept, if you see what I mean, and it's used almost as a sort of symbol which substitutes for a possible reality. So people can deal with this symbol of darkness and actually avoid dealing with anything that's actually real, but they can just keep on and on and on referring to it and talking about it. And really, yes, it's a symbol, but it's a symbol as avoidance, I think. Usually when people are talking about darkness and referring to things which they think of as being dark, yeah, they're generally talking to things which reference things like anger, lust, survival impulses, hungers, yeah. Often things that monotheistic religions tend to view with great suspicion or as vices, yeah. The thing that with these kinds of emotions and states of mind is that they tend to have heaviness with them, heaviness to them. They tend to kind of dominate consciousness when they're in consciousness, and they tend to be very compelling. So there's a quality of compulsion to these kind of things that people associate with darkness. Now, people refer to the devil as, a god of darkness, or as the Dark Lord, and of course the devil is absolutely not just that, yeah. But people do tend to refer to him as that. It's one of his epithets. It's one of the things that he's known by. There's an association with darkness and the powers of darkness and all this sort of thing, association with the night, etc., yeah. And what people tend to do is they valorize these emotions such as anger, lust, etc., yeah, because of the association between darkness and the devil, yeah. And they almost seem to posit these things as almost heroic or anti-heroic, yeah. But the thing is, why are they seen as dark, yeah? Well, the thing with these sorts of emotions and feelings and experiences is that they put us in touch with the body and with the subconscious and the instinctive, yeah. So from one point of view, they are moving away from a kind of pure sort of daylight consciousness, kind of towards unconsciousness in a sense. There's a sort of loss. There's from a certain point of view, there's a loss of consciousness, yeah, and there's a moving towards unconsciousness in them, yeah. Now, they can be healthy and natural things. They can actually be appropriate under various circumstances, yeah. Oh, obviously, you know, I mean, the idea that lust would not be appropriate is kind of a bit silly, yeah. Obviously, it's a very natural thing, yeah. And all sorts of passions are very natural and appropriate in various circumstances, yeah. They're part of our experiencing the raw stuff of being, yeah. So they are very potent for us, yeah. And being cut off from them is definitely suppressive, and it blocks growth and development, and it harms people without doubt, yeah. But that doesn't mean you have to embrace these things uncritically. They're not automatically healthy or appropriate, yeah. And so the idea that they're somehow heroic is obviously a very sort of reactive stance, yeah. They also bring a sense of power in some way, because the unconscious is powerful and mysterious. But this is not a power that can really belong to you, yeah. And I think that's something that has to be understood. The sense of power there, it's kind of a projection, really, and the identification with that projection is delusional, essentially. Maybe another thing is that because also some of our contact with things like the spirit world is through the more subconscious parts of ourselves, we have this association there as well. So there's sort of a bit of a crossover of areas and worlds there. So it's kind of another thing. But I think the thing is, though, the sense of power, it's not your power, okay? It's not something that's ever going to be yours, yeah? In the way that your hand is yours in that way, or what have you, you know? And I think that's something to sort of to really be aware of. We are between two types of consciousness, yeah, conscious and subconscious. But what does the relationship to darkness bring about? What does this relationship in our intermediate state, what does this relationship to what we call in darkness, what does it bring about? And what does it bring light to, actually? Because we are conscious and subconscious, yeah. We're between two qualities in a sense, yeah. Because you see, a lot of people will think about, you know, like monotheistic religions always want you to seek the light, and to, in a sense, shun any idea of darkness, yeah. But I think from my point of view as a diabolist, the point isn't to seek light or to avoid darkness, but to bring light, because really that is part of the job of consciousness. It's part of the job of consciousness, and for many diabolists that's considered to be a gift of the devil. So bringing light is a very important thing for diabolists, in my view. Now, seeking darkness without bringing light does not increase awareness, yeah. And that causes problems. It brings about problems. And we have choices, yeah? We actually have a choice. We can wallow in unconsciousness, or we can explore our greater nature and bring light to it. Gain light from it, in fact, yeah? We can become more fully ourselves, and we can live in dynamic harmony with life and the world. This is an inner undertaking, though. You could say it's an esoteric undertaking, and it's not an exoteric plaything. And to treat it as such is disastrous. I think the truth of the matter is that this infantile, heroic idea of darkness is really mainly a bolstering of weak egos. it's a crutch. Most essentially, I think. I think that's an awful lot of what's going on there, really. I mean, if we look at things more naturally and non-selectively, you know, darkness also includes things like decay, disease, weakness. These are things which we also disown, yeah? And they are suppressed in consciousness often, yeah? We don't want to think about those things. They're part of darkness too, yeah? You see, it's much bigger than simply human or ego concerns, yeah? And so all this, you know, be a super being type stuff is, it seems like an awful long way from diabolism to me, you know, to be truthful. The balance of nature, it requires the rotting power of ripening. It requires the repose of unconsciousness. It requires the endings of limitation and termination. And so it actually allows renewal through that as well. There's a lot to look into here, there really is. But it's not ego, and it's not separative survival. There's no supermen here, yeah? But people would rather bolster weak egos, really, you know. I'm afraid that's the kind of lowest common denominator. There's lots to look into in the subject of darkness. I mean, what happens when people just succumb to unconsciousness, you know, uncritically, yeah? Well, succumbing to unconsciousness is gratifying in the short term. There's no doubt about it. But in the long term, it's disastrous. It leads to things like addiction, disease, dysfunctional relationships, broken families, child abuse. It's not a game or a cartoon. I think, well, certainly if you looked online, but I think we see far too much lack of understanding of nature and lack of understanding of the cyclical. We see a valorizing of weakness masquerading as brutal strength, at least in people's minds, you know, and their fantasies. People really need to stop thinking in cliches. Cliches carried over from modern Satanism and adolescent pseudo-occultism. We need to turn our backs on these things. We need to completely turn our backs on them and close that door. We need to explore the world, yeah? We need to explore world spirituality. You need to explore philosophy. You need to study. You need to read. You need to observe directly and learn to observe directly. You need to be creative and get in contact with nature. That's a really good thing to do. We are between dark and light. But we need to be so intelligently and with heart. Ultimately, things move towards wholeness, or else they cannot live out their potential. And then the experiment just stops because it's failed, yeah? But it doesn't have to fail. Everything has pattern and a course unfolding in it. All things have a pattern and a course unfolding within them. We can actually explore that and find what the pattern is that's unfolding within us. And that is how we can live fully and flourish. Thank you for watching.